Hey guys, welcome to module 12 of CompTIA A+. So this is obviously module 3 for core 2, but it's module 12 in the full course. And if you are still watching this series at this point in time, drop a comment down below saying something along the lines of hell yeah. Anyone watching this series would know exactly what you mean by that because they've obviously been following the series with you. So drop a comment down below saying hell yeah, and then we'll all know that you've been watching all the way to module 12. Now, as most of you guys probably already know, today's module is all about security. It's going to be a fun module. And speaking about security, here is today's main topics: logical security concepts, threats and vulnerabilities, and physical security measures. Now, that's not the only topics we're going to be looking at today. That's simply the main topics we're going to be looking at. If you want a better idea of what we're going to be looking at, you can go check the video description down below. There you'll find the usual timestamps, and that should give you, a better idea of what you can expect in this video. It's not exactly, at the end of the day, you're still going to have to watch the video to know exactly what's in the video, but it should give you a more or less idea. Now, speaking of timestamps, those are there for your convenience. If you're new in this channel, I add these timestamps in each video's description for your convenience. So if you already know a lot of this stuff and just want to refresh on a certain topic, or you're looking for a specific topic, timestamps. Maybe you've watched the video once before and you're about to go write the exam and you just want to refresh on a certain topic, timestamps. They're there for your convenience. Now, since I've done all of that effort, give the video a like. It does help my video, does help my channel, basically gives it a boost, so to speak. If you're new on this channel, you would like to know when I release more videos like this one, subscribe down below, and I'll see you in the rest of the series. So now that we've got all of that out of the way, I think the only thing that's left to do is to go and have some fun. So let's go look at our first topic. All right, now one of the first things we're going to be taking a look at today is security basics. I mean, you've got to start somewhere, right? And where better to start than with the basics. Now, within security basics, the first thing we're going to be looking at is CIA Triad. Doesn't that just sound fancy? Sounds like some sort of investigation bureau or something from America. Now, CIA is actually an abbreviation for confidentiality. That's what the C stands for. Integrity is what the I stands for, and availability is what the A stands for. So it's confidentiality, integrity, and availability. All of this is something that falls in with security. So if you have a document or whatever, it may or may not be your responsibility to make sure that the items, the contents, remains confidential. So sometimes we just need to prevent people from copying that document or whatever it might be, or gaining access to it, or being able to change the contents. And when you get times when your responsibility is going to be to make sure that the contents remains confidential. Nobody's allowed to see it. Integrity means nobody has been allowed to tamper with that. So this could be done via permissions perhaps, maybe just full out blocking people out. So making sure people cannot tamper with the contents, whatever this might be. Let's assume it's a document. Availability, making sure that people cannot go and tamper with settings blocking other people. This could be something like a denial of service attack. So if someone's going to go and overload your service because they've gained access, that could potentially hinder your availability. Maybe they can go and block other people out, perhaps. There's many things that falls into the category of availability. Something else that's very important with regarding security basics is your security policies. Policies is something you guys are going to be hearing a lot of. Not just in CompTIA, just in general in IT. You get so many kinds of policies. Sometimes it's just a general policy. Sometimes it's something that you need to actually go and configure. Most of the time, it's something you need to go and configure. Now, using policies, you can go and do something called harden systems. Hardening a system, whether we're talking about a server, a firewall, whatever it might be, means you're improving the security. You're being very tight on your security. So if you've got ports open on the firewall, any port that you're not using, you're probably going to go and close. It's like closing a window in your house that you're not using. So if nobody's in that room, it might be a good idea to close that window. Otherwise, a villain could go around your house or your office building, look for open windows, and if they find one and they see there's nobody in that room, yeah, well, they can obviously climb in and change something or take something. Maybe take your TV, for all we know. So if you have a port open on your computers, your firewalls, your servers, close it. Any websites that should not be allowed, block those websites. Any services that should not be allowed, go and block those services. Any programs and stuff that should not be installed, uninstall them. All of this falls into the category of hardening your systems. Now, very often you guys are also going to be in charge of covering all aspects of computer and network technology, from procurement to change to disposal, all the way through. Sometimes you might not be involved at all, sometimes you're only partially involved. So when you eventually get new technology, whether it's something network related, computer related, or whatever related, what is the procedure for that? How do you actually get that? Can you not just go and get yourself a random PC or random server? If that's the case, that's pretty risky, because how do you know that that piece of computer technology doesn't have some form of malware on it, perhaps spyware even? How did you obtain that technology? How do you change technology? So if you need to go and change computers, change spare parts, or change anything for that matter, what is the protocol? What is the procedure for that? And eventually, when you go and dispose of your IT equipment and stuff, how do you dispose of that? Now, the last one, being disposal, is the one that confuses people the most. So generally when we hear disposal, you think of just throwing something in the trash. I mean, what's the big deal? Well, it's because your stuff may or may not contain something very sensitive in nature, especially if you go look at hard drives. So if you're disposing of an old laptop, an old desktop, does it still have the hard drive in? Or if you're just throwing away an old hard drive, whether it's a working one or a broken one, let's assume it's a broken one, how do you dispose of that? Do you just throw it in the trash? That's not a good idea, because first of all, you should go and recycle, metal and all of that. But secondly, because it doesn't matter how badly damaged the hard drive is, in most cases, that data can be recovered and can be restored. Now, it's probably going to cost you an arm and a leg to do that, and for the average company, it's not worth it to go and do that, because it's going to cost them more to go and recover that data than to just go and put in a new blank hard drive and replicate it from their backups or their RAID arrays. For those of you that remember what RAID is from the RAID module, it's going to be a lot cheaper. I mean, they have backups after all, why not? But for someone that does not have the data in the first place, maybe it's the opposition, they might want your trade secrets. They will be willing to go and pay a lot of money to get that data recovered, because it's not like they've got another copy of it. So yeah, how do you dispose of that? A lot of companies will get an actual company to come in, a third party. They will collect these computers and these hard drives and whatever it might be. They will actually go and destroy them, incinerate them, or shred them. Normally it's incineration, melt them down and all that. And once they've done that, they'll give you a certificate that you can go put on file for your auditors. A lot of companies get audited, and when these auditors come in and they want to know, what do you do with all these old hard drives? I mean, maybe you really did destroy them, but where's the proof? If you do it yourself, or if your company does it itself, there's no proof of it. But if you get an external company that actually specializes in this to come and do it, they'll make note of the serial numbers and all that kinds of jazz. And when they dispose of it, they give you a certificate which you can go and present to your auditors. Basically get them off your back. Okay, next up is security controls. And within this section, we have physical controls and procedural controls. Now, if you look at physical controls there, you'll see obvious things like fences, doors, locks, and you're probably thinking to yourself, dear God, really? Yes, really, that is actually in the course. I'm not sucking this out of my thumb, actually, for a change. I've been known to talk a lot of nonsense, but this is not me talking nonsense. That actually is in the A+ course. I kid you not. I'm dead serious. That is in the course. So with regards to physical security, I mean, that just makes sense. You can go and keep people out of certain places by using fences. I suppose that's more for outside. Doors, maybe not like a hollow door. This needs to probably be a proper door. Locks, you get so many kinds of locks these days. Now, what doesn't really make sense to me, and this is CompTIA, not me, is why is fire extinguishers in the physical control section? So physical controls, yes, I suppose fire extinguishers is a form of physical control to control a fire. So in that sense, yes, it makes sense. But we are in the security control section. So yes, physical controls subsection of the security controls section. So if you look at fire extinguishers from a security perspective, it doesn't make sense unless you plan on clobbering someone over the head with a fire extinguisher, like in a good old action movie. I don't know, man. That's just me. But yeah, physical control, as a normal physical control, fire extinguisher does qualify, because it's a means for you to physically control a situation like a fire. Under procedural controls, we have something called incident response processes. So if there is some sort of incident at your environment, your client's environment, what is the process? Now, what classifies as an incident could be a lot of things. This could be a medical incident. Maybe someone's choking on a cookie. This could be a fire hazard. Maybe there's some smoke. Maybe there's a fire that's broken out. That could be an incident. Maybe there's an armed robbery. Maybe there's been theft that took place. All of these classifies as an incident of some kind. So when you stumble across this robbery, as if people just stumble across a robbery, what's the process for that? The second one there is management oversight. So from a management perspective, how do those folks keep an eye on you and everyone and everything they're supposed to keep an eye on? How do they do that? I suppose one way would probably be to go and use actual security cameras. That's an actual physical oversight. They can actually see you on the cameras. Digitally speaking, this might be some form of monitoring software. There's so many kinds of monitoring software you get on the market these days. Some of them are Microsoft, some of them are third-party softwares. There's just too many to mention. So how does management know exactly what's going on? So this could be something as simple as you just doing something like buying something. If you want to go and buy new computers for your company, maybe it's new spare parts, maybe it's replacement parts. How does management actually know about that? It could be a matter of them maybe needing to sign off on a document, perhaps. As soon as they sign off on a piece of paper, obviously they would know about it then. At least that's the idea. Now, with regards to security awareness, that could be a lot of things that falls into that category. It could once again be security cameras. That obviously allows you, your company, to be aware of what's going on. This could be logs. So if we're talking about digital security on computers and servers and your environment, this could be logs. Logs keep track of everything that happens. If this is physical security we're talking about, it could also, in a manner of speaking, be logs, if you think about it. So in a lot of office parks these days in the world, if people want to enter, they need to go and write down their credentials, their personal credentials, social security number or ID number, depending on what country you're in. Could be a passport number, your first name, your last name. All of those are details they're going to ask of you. And that allows us to know who was on our premises. So these are things that falls into the category of security awareness. Obviously, that's not the only things, but it should give you a more or less idea. And then training. So what could be in training is training your people on what to go and do in the event of something security related, most likely. So in the event of there being theft, what are people supposed to do? They're supposed to go and report it. Maybe to HR, to IT, to a manager. Who are they supposed to report it to? If that's assuming they need to go and report this. I'm assuming they need to. If there's a medical incident, what are they supposed to go and do? You need to train these people. Most companies have people that's medically trained. They're not necessarily medics, but they should generally have some level of medical training so that if someone is choking on a cookie there, they can start doing, the necessities while the emergency responders obviously are on their way. If there's a fire, you need to preferably have one or two individuals in that company that can fight fires. So it's a low-level, rookie-level firefighter, if you will. So they need to start assessing the situation and start taking care of the situation. Maybe grab a fire extinguisher, try their best to start, extinguishing some of the smaller fires until the fire department gets there. So all of these are things that you can probably expect to find in the training category. And then obviously digital training as well. So if you've got people in your company, whether it's your people, whether it's your clients' people, their staff, they need to be trained on the basics with regards to security. It could be something as simple as not opening an email from someone you don't know. Kind of like not getting into a car with strangers. Your teachers or your parents probably would told you as a child, don't get into a car with strangers. Now, when you get that email from a stranger that you're not expecting an email from, that's a bit risky, especially if it's got a suspicious attachment attached to it or a suspicious link. Do not open that attachment if you were not expecting one. Do not click on that link if you're not expecting one. It's going to trigger some form of malware, most likely ransomware these days, and that's absolutely not a situation you want to find your company in. That is disastrous. Now, to add on to the security controls section, let's take a look at logical controls and then also legal, regulatory, and compliance controls. The logical is more, the word I think I'm looking for is digital. So things you can expect to find in logical would probably be things like user authentication. In other words, the user needs to prove that he or she is the owner to that account or to that device they're trying to log on to. So if it's an account like a YouTube account, Facebook account, Gmail account, maybe it's an Active Directory account at the office, the fact that your username or your email address combined with your password unlocks that account, that's generally proof that you're the owner. Or the fact that your phone receives the OTP, the one-time PIN, or the fact that your phone has the Authenticator app on it, where you need to go and acknowledge some sort of acknowledgement perhaps, or the fact that your fingerprint unlocks that device or that account. Maybe it's facial recognition, voice recognition. So that is authentication, proving that you are the owner to that account or that device. You also get other things like software-based access controls. Speaks for itself. I mean, you get antivirus. Everybody knows what an antivirus is and what firewalls is. So an antivirus does just that. It's an antidote basically to possible viruses you may or may not have on your computer. It's going to prevent you from getting them. And if you have some already, or if you do get some perhaps, it's going to help you hopefully remedy that situation, either by removing it or quarantining it or just kind of blocking it to a certain extent, mitigating some of the effects. A firewall, which is not an actual wall that's full of fire, I mean, we've discussed that, previously in a previous module in this course, it's a means for you to go and block or allow certain ports, services, URLs, just to name a few. Obviously, it's way more than just that. Now, from a legal, regulatory, and compliance perspective, you get things like privacy laws. In some countries, there's certain privacy laws which does not allow you to disclose certain people's names, last names, their social security or ID numbers or passport numbers, license plates for vehicles. So you need their consent. And sometimes even if you do have their consent, it might still not be allowed in some countries. So depending on what country you're in, you should probably go and familiarize yourself with your local country laws, your local country regulatory requirements, and just local policies and clauses. It's not the same. So what applies to me does not necessarily apply to you. You need to go and check that for your specific country. And if you're going to be working with things in the cloud, not necessarily something you guys need to be worried about now, unless you happen to be working in the cloud, then you might need to look at your local laws and also the country where you're hosting your stuff. You need to go and look at their regulatory requirements and laws. So if I am in country A, I'm going to have to look at my laws and regulatory requirements. And wherever my stuff is being hosted in the world, go check their laws and requirements as well, because maybe your stuff is not allowed to be hosted in that country. It might be against their terms and conditions, maybe not yours, but theirs. So that is quite a mouthful and something to consider. Something else we can expect to find in the security control section is once again logical controls, except this time it's logical security controls. So overall operation of your access control systems. So this could be a lot of things. It could be something as simple as smart cards. Maybe you cannot open a certain door at your company unless you've got a certain badge, certain smart card, biometric locks. Could be a lot of things like that. It's not just limited to that. And you also have implementing multiple AAA Triad functions for more effective security systems. Sounds very fancy, but it just comes down to normal authentication. Once again, proving you are who you say you are. You can think of that as step 1, which pretty much always takes place. Authorization is step 2, which does not necessarily take place. That is something maybe like an Active Directory account. So once you have proven that you are indeed a member or an employee of that account by logging on of a company account, obviously only you as the actual employee or member of that company would know that credentials. Once you've logged on as that employee, you've proven that you are an employee or a member, then authorization will go and step in or take place, which is basically checking what level of access you have as that particular user. It might say, oh, okay, you are indeed an employee or a member, but you are just a salesperson. Therefore, you only have access to whatever you would expect a salesperson to have access to. Or it might say, oh, you know what? You are actually an IT person, so you've got a little bit more access than the average individual. Or maybe you're a manager. Accounting is pretty much, for the most part, just keeping logs. It's not the only thing it is, but I think that's the easiest way to explain that one. So whenever someone logs on and does something, everything gets logged and it gets accounted. So it doesn't matter who you are, what you did digitally speaking, everything gets kept as a log. So if something goes wrong along the way, we can go and investigate afterwards and catch you and see who it was, what they did, where they did it, and when they did it. Everything gets logged. Okay, let's talk a bit about something else. Implicit deny
and least privilege. Now, as you can see, implicit deny says unless something has explicitly been granted access, it should be denied access. This applies to a lot of things. It applies to people, it applies to software, you name it. So if someone wants access to certain softwares or credentials, you're going to go and deny them that by default. If something wants something, if something wants access to certain credentials or certain resources, you're going to by default go and block it. If someone wants something physical, let's say a new laptop, a new tablet, a new desktop, maybe it's spare parts, it could be a document, you are going to go and deny them that by default. That is procedure in most companies, big or small. It's a good rule of thumb to have. So we're going to get to least privilege in a moment. So if someone wants log-on credentials, whether it's their own or someone else's, there's probably a procedure in place at that company which needs to be followed. The way you need to go about giving them the credentials is something you need to go and look at. So if someone wants their log-on credentials because maybe they've forgotten it or whatever situation might be, you cannot by default just go ahead and give that person that credentials. There's most likely a procedure that you and that individual needs to follow before you can just go ahead and give them those credentials. So if something goes wrong along the way, there needs to be a paper trail, in other words. Let's say someone asks you for a new laptop or a desktop. You cannot just go and give them a new laptop or a desktop. Or maybe it's a document, perhaps. What is the procedure for that? So they're probably going to have to sign for that. At the very least, they're probably going to have to put in some form of request first for this new device or this piece of hardware. And if and when you eventually end up giving it to them, they're probably going to have to go and sign for it. So you're not just going to go and give it out like sweets. No. Everything is going to be denied by default. So whether we're talking about software, whether we're talking about access to certain information or documents, whether we're talking about something physical like a new computer or a piece of hardware, your default action should be to go and deny those people and to be denying everything for that matter, unless you've obviously had proof to cover your hiney. Moving on to least privilege, that means you never give something or someone more privilege or permissions than what they need, or also known as rights. So it says something should be allocated the minimum necessary rights, privileges, or information to perform its role. So if you have someone in your company that's working for you or along with you, you're not going to give that someone more privilege than what they need to be able to do their task. It doesn't matter even if they are in IT. So even most IT people will not have more privilege than what they need to do their tasks. So you might even find that you are the main cheese of that company. You are the main IT guy, and you would think that you are probably going to have the main admin account, which means you've got full privilege. You can do pretty much anything that you can imagine on the network. And in some cases that might be the case. Some companies that might be the case. Small, especially smaller companies. Some smaller companies would have the technician use the main admin account, and that person can do whatever they want. But that's a bad idea, because what if one day that account of yours gets compromised? What if it gets hacked? Maybe you had some spyware in your PC that you were not aware of. Someone spies on you, gets a hold of those credentials, and now what? So one of the many reasons we give someone least privilege is to limit the amount of damage that account can go and do. So it's not necessarily going to be a situation of that person is going to do the damage. It could be a matter of their account's going to get compromised. So in the event of one day, hypothetically speaking, if one of those people's accounts get compromised because they got hacked, clicked on the wrong link, someone saw their password, if and when that happens, it is going to happen at some point in time. When that happens, you want to go and do what we call damage control. You want to limit the amount of damage that hacker can go and do. And if it does turn out to be that actual person, you want to limit the amount of damage that person can go and do. Maybe it's a disgruntled employee. If they did not get their annual increase, did not get a bonus this month, whatever the situation might be, they're a little upset with you or the company, and they decide, you know what, I'm going to go rogue. And if that ends up being the case, we want to limit the amount of damage they can go and do. We're not saying they're not going to do any damage. There's probably still going to be some level of damage, but we want to limit that some level of damage. And if you are the main admin, like I said earlier, let's say this is you for a moment, you are going to go and use a different account. I did this at a lot of my clients where I would go and make myself a normal user account. Sometimes it's a limited admin account, where I can go just do the bare minimum. and I would only go and use the main admin account when I absolutely need to. And when that happens, if at all possible, I will go and use a dedicated computer even for that. So there's a computer that's just standing one side, it's probably not even running. There's pretty much almost nothing even installed in that computer. And then one day, if I need to go and use the main admin account, I will go and use that dedicated machine for that dedicated account, which has almost nothing installed on it. It might even just have the normal Internet Explorer on it, not even a normal browser. And why is that? That is just to reduce the chances of there being anything harmful on that PC, to reduce the chances of there being spyware on there. So it's not going to stop it completely. At the end of the day, you can never stop someone from hacking you. I just want to make it so darn gosh difficult for these people that's trying to hack me, my client, or my company. It needs to be near impossible. It needs to be so darn gosh difficult that they're going to be like, you know what, bro? Let's just move on to the next company. This is too difficult. That's what you want to achieve here. Now, looking at our little bullet points at the bottom here, logical security founded on the principle of implicit deny. So this applies to facilities, computer, hardware, software, information. Basically what I said earlier. So if someone wants access to certain facilities, certain rooms, whatever, you're not going to give them access. By default, everyone is blocked. So the only way they're going to gain access is to maybe you specifically grant them access. Let's say give them an access card, or they need a PIN number. So unless you know about it, this person will not have access. Applies to hardware, like I said earlier. So if someone wants a new computer, maybe it's new hardware for that computer, a new mouse, a new keyboard, they're not going to get that. By default, my answer is no. You're probably going to have to justify it. Why do you need a computer or a mouse? What is it that you need? Oh, okay, it's a mouse. Why do you need that mouse? And if you tell me, and let's say you give me a valid reason, you're going to have to go and put in an order for that, log it, put it on mail, get it approved by management, and only then will I give you that new mouse that you want. Software is the same situation. If you want new software, is there licensing involved? Why do you need that software? What do you intend on using it for? Is it going to cost the company money? And if so, how much? And you're going to have to go and put in a request for that and get it approved. If you want information, this could be anything. Information about something, someone, maybe it's logon credentials. You are going to have to go through the whole proper procedure before I will give you anything. And then lastly, least privilege is a complementary principle. In other words, a user is granted only rights necessary to perform their job. You guys are going to get a few questions about this one in the exam, so watch out for this topic, least privilege especially. So normally in the exam, you will find 2, 3, or 4 possible accounts. And I'm not going to give you the actual question in the exam, but it's going to go somewhere along the line where it'll say user 1 needs to be able to go and do blah, blah, blah. This could be anything. And you need to allow user 1 to go and do blah, blah, blah using the principle of least privilege. Which account or which role will you assign to user 1? And you're going to find out of the 4 possible answers in the exam, because it's normally 4 possible answers, one of them is normally something like the main admin account. Which is, yes, that's going to get the job done. That person will definitely have the right permissions. But he or she will have too much privilege in most cases. So 9 out of 10 times in the exam, it is not the main admin account. I can almost guarantee you it's not the main admin account. Whenever they say using the principle of least privilege, you can be damn sure it's probably going to be one of the other 3 possible answers. Your job is to identify which one of those 3 other accounts it is. Which one of those 3 other limited accounts it will be. So which account can still get the job done, but not give that person too much privilege. Alright guys, before we move on to our next topic in this module, I would like for you guys to help me with something. And that is to share knowledge. Free IT knowledge, that is. I'd like for you to drop a comment down below, and it can actually be about anything really. The more likes and the more comments this video gets, the more YouTube promotes it. And the more YouTube promotes it, the more people will see it. People that may or may not be able to go and attend a course because they might not have enough money to do so. So you'll be helping me, you'll be helping this video, you'll be helping this channel, and you'll be helping any future people that might need to study that just don't have the money to do so. So these comments can be about anything. It can, for example, be to let me know what you think of this training so far. Maybe let me know what you'd like to see in this training or what you'd like to see more of. Or if you perhaps have any questions about a specific module, well, you can drop those down below too. Lastly, if you haven't done so already, drop a like down there for me. It'll be doing me a real solid if you do that. and obviously for any future people who would like to watch this video or this series. Alrighty, so now that I've got my good deed out of the way, my karma for the day, so to speak, I think let's move on to that next topic, which is execution control. Now, as you can see, logical security technology is designed to prevent malicious software from running on a host and establishing a security system that does not entirely depend on the good behavior of individual users. Sounds very complicated, but what they mean by execution is that's basically when you go and launch a program, install a program, launch something or install something for the most part. And what's meant by the second word there, control, is a means or a way for you to take back control. To prevent people from just randomly installing or running things on their computers, or to prevent just random malware from installing or running things on your computer or one of your users' computers. So the users themselves, that is already a bit of a concern because we're always going to have people in a company that's going to try and install things they're not supposed to. It could be something like torrent downloading software, which is generally not allowed on company software or on company PCs. That's obviously frowned upon. Plus, it's just plain illegal in most cases to go and do that. It's also to prevent malware from randomly executing themselves on your PC. So if you've got people in your company that's got malware on a PC, there is a chance that some of that malware might actually try and launch itself or try and install other malware in your computer. That's bad. To prevent this from happening, we use something called execution control. There's many ways you can go about this. There's many softwares you can go and use this. But to a certain extent, we actually already have things and measures built into your Windows operating system to take care of this. One of which is actually the UAC, User Account Control, something we actually did cover to a certain extent in previous modules. So now, whenever you want to go and install something or run something, your computer or the user's computer is going to say, are you sure you want to run this program? So the reason it asks you, are you sure? You might think, okay, but why is it doing that? That's just annoying. It's because if it was a piece of malware that was trying to run something on behalf of you, as if it is you, it cannot go and say, yes, I'm sure. It's going to try and run it, and if this message pops up, it's not going to be able to get past that in most cases because it does not know how to get past that. There are exceptions, obviously, to the rule. I mean, there's weird hackers and developers out there that really know their stuff and they know how to get that malware to basically answer that question as if it is you, which is why it gets more complex than that. Sometimes your UAC or whatever you've got in place might actually even prompt for an account. It might actually ask you for a username or a password, generally some form of admin username or password. So if you're about to go and install some sort of software or run something serious on your machine, it might very well actually ask you, are you sure you want to run this? And just to make sure it really is you, or you really are allowed to run this, we're going to require you to provide some form of administrator account and administrator password. This is also a pretty good way to go and prevent your employees from just randomly installing whatever they want. So instead of making them full out admins on their machines, which they generally are, you can make them a normal user, a standard user if you want to go and call it something. And when that individual tries to install something, they're not going to be able to. It's going to prompt that person for an account. That's your account or one of your fellow IT people's accounts. So they're going to have to call you first via email, via phone, or whatever smoke signals they want to go and use. And once you eventually get there, or one of your colleagues gets there, they will need to provide their credentials, or maybe it might be you, and only then can that software actually install or run on that computer. Now, something else we can look at with regards to execution control is trusted and untrusted software sources. There's many, so if you go look at something like the Windows Store, which is something you all will know if you've been running Windows 10 or Windows 8.1, or even that new Windows 11 that's being released, you would know about the Windows Store. That platform has got a lot of softwares on there, which is not all Microsoft, but they're all guaranteed to be safe. And that's because Microsoft goes and tests those softwares and use certificates and all kinds of ways to verify that these programs are actually legit and not some sort of malware that's going to harm you, your computer, or your environment. There's many other platforms out there, like for example Google's Play Store. Very well known, many softwares on there, and obviously some of those softwares could potentially have some malware on there.
Now, on average, you should be okay. If you're going to go download something well known like WhatsApp, you should be okay because everybody uses that. And if there was something wrong with it, you probably would have heard about it by now. But whenever you're going to go and download something out of the ordinary, something you don't know anyone that uses that software, that game, you've never even heard of that software, that game, you need to be very alert then because there's a very good chance that piece of software could be a piece of malware. The reason I'm saying that is because anyone can go and upload something to the Play Store, including you. You might say something along the lines as, no, I go and check the reviews. I go and check the comments. Did you know you can actually go and comment on your own program? You can, in the past, you had to go and have multiple phones and multiple accounts. You can actually do it with one phone. One phone or one tablet with just multiple accounts, which is easy peasy. I can do that in less than 5 minutes. Comment on my own program, rate my own program 5 out of 5 stars the whole time. And I just go and say stuff like, this is a wonderful program. And you're going to believe that and you're going to go and download it. Meanwhile, it's malware. So you need to be very alert if it's something you've never heard of and you don't know anyone that's ever used that program. So whenever I myself personally really want to go and run something new and I don't know anyone that uses that, I myself use the sheep in a minefield concept. I'm not saying you should do that. I don't encourage it. It's just something I like to go and do. That means I basically go and check, if one of my friends or someone I know goes and downloads that software, I'm going to let them do that. I'm going to leave it for a while. And after a few days or so, I'm going to ask them about that program. And I'm going to ask them, hey, how's that game or that program working out for you? And if they say, no, dude, ever since I've installed this game or this program, my phone or my tablet's been acting all whack, well, then I know. Don't download it. Don't install it. If they tell me, okay, no, it's fine, well, then I'm going to go and do it. So sheep in the minefield concept is what we say. Now, with regarding trusted and untrusted software sources, restrict the ability of users to run unapproved program code. This can be done via so many ways. I cannot even mention it just in this course. That's how many ways there is. One of the most common ways is to use user accounts. So you and your IT colleagues would be administrators, either full-blown admins or limited admins, and the average end user or the average client would just use normal standard accounts. Whenever they try and run a program or install a program, it's going to ask for credentials, which is an IT person's credentials. You'll see they also make mention there of user account control, in other words, the famous UAC. That is the platform that's going to keep popping up with those annoying messages that keep saying, are you sure you want to run this or install this? And it's also the platform that's going to be asking you for those usernames and passwords, which is yours. Alternatively, you can also go make use of system policies. There is so many policies you get nowadays. This could be normal system policies, it could be group policies. It's 10 to 1 realistically going to be some sort of group policy that you're going to be using. You'll also see there's mention here of app developers should use digital certificates for code signing. Now, whenever you're going to go and try and upload your application or your app to certain platforms, like the Windows Store, for example, you're going to have to provide some form of proof that that application of yours is safe, that it's not some form of malware. You would remember earlier I said Microsoft guarantees all software on there is safe for use. Now, how do they do that? One way is to make people provide some form of proof that this application is indeed fine. So they're going to go and check it out themselves, but it's also people providing some sort of certificate. So if you have a program or if you have an application you developed or your developers developed it, they will need to go and take it to some sort of CA, certificate authority is what we call it, CA. It could be something like GoDaddy. It's not limited to GoDaddy. They will go and check it out and they will see, okay, you know what, this program is not harmful. It all seems in order. They will issue you with a certificate and you will need to go and upload said certificate to this platform like Windows Store before you can go and upload your program. You also have third-party network management suites that enforce application control. This could literally be anything. It could be some sort of networking software. It could be your firewall. Remember, it could actually be a physical firewall. So when it's some sort of server, firewall, or software, you can effectively go and do what we call a blacklist, whitelist of software. So if someone or someone's tries to run certain software, you can go and block it. Most softwares are actually whitelisted by default, so it's more a matter of you're going to probably go and blacklist stuff. Lastly, disable autorun. That is something very important. I do agree you should definitely go and disable autorun, but it doesn't really feel
like it belongs here between these applications. It does belong in the execution control category, but not amongst applications so much. So what is this? This is more applicable to things like a memory stick or a flash drive, potentially an external drive, but it's more common with amongst flash drives. So if you have a memory stick that's got certain video files, music, games, programs, and stuff on it, you probably would have noticed by now that when you go and stick that memory stick into your average machine, laptop or desktop, doesn't matter, on most machines, there's going to be a little window that's going to pop up automatically, and it's going to give you quite often suggestions of what programs you could potentially go and use to open some of those files. One of the options is just to go and open Explorer. If there's music files on there, it's probably going to give you a few suggestions of media players on that computer. If there's video files, also a few video player suggestions. If there is maybe some PDF documents, Office documents, whatever kind of documents you have on there, it's going to give you suggestions on what you can use on that machine to open those files. So that machine might have a few programs installed, it might not. You might think, okay, well, that sounds pretty cool. Why would I want to go and disable that? It is because if that memory stick or that external drive has got any form of malware on it, most malwares out there execute on autorun. So if you prevent autorun from popping up in this little window, it at least gives you a chance to go and right click on that memory stick or that flash drive and to go and click on the option that says scan flash drive or scan hard drive. So if you've got some sort of antivirus, this at least gives you a fighting chance. You're not going to stop all these malwares completely, but it gives you a fighting chance. So on your own personal machine, I definitely encourage you to go and do this. You'll find a lot of IT technicians, even juniors, have this enforced. And if you haven't done this already on your machine, I encourage you to do it. Never mind doing this for the exam. This might be an exam question, by the way. But besides the exam, you should do this on your computer, probably right away. If you don't know how to go and do it, I encourage you to go and Google it or YouTube it. Go and check. There's bound to be some form of YouTube video that'll show you how to go and do that. If it is something you would like to know and you can't find it, let me know. Drop a comment down below. And I'll gladly make a short video showing you exactly how to go about disabling the autorun. I'll do it as a little extra for you guys, just for the fun of it, if that is something you guys would like to know. Okay, and then we actually have even more to say about execution control, the first of which is heuristic. So a monitoring technique that allows dynamic pattern matching based on past experience rather than relying on preloaded signatures. Fancy, fancy, right? You also have anti-malware. So remember, anti-malware is not something specific, or I should say malware is not something specific. Malware is a category which includes a lot of things. Worms, viruses, trojans, spyware, adware, ransomware, just to name a few. And if I say anti-malware, it's obviously going to go and include everything like anti-spyware, antivirus, all of those. So anti-malware software that scans devices for malicious software, which includes a lot. It's a whole category that it's going to go and scan. One of those is an antivirus. It's not the only thing you're going to find under anti-malware. It detects malware and prevents it from executing. So sometimes you might already have malware on your machine or your client's machine. It might very well have already executed. And in that situation, the antivirus's job is to go and block it from doing any further damage, if possible. It might not always be possible. And to potentially try and either quarantine it or delete it completely from the machine. An antivirus uses a database of known patterns. That's basically your definitions and signatures, as you can see. So whether you've got a third-party antivirus that you bought off the shelf, maybe you've got your built-in Windows Defender, which actually is an antivirus, either way, potato, potato, they all use the concept of definitions and signatures. So whenever your antivirus updates itself, it updates itself with the latest definitions and signatures. So that big database that it's got on your computer, which contains all these signatures and definitions, it's going to go and update that. And once it updates that, it will be able to recognize new forms of malware. It's basically you giving it a sample of all the kinds of viruses and malware that's out there. Think of it as a giant library or database of all kinds of samples. And if your antivirus is just going to randomly scan, it's not going to know what it's scanning for if it doesn't have a sample of the new virus. So if you go and update the latest updates or definitions, you're giving it little itsy bitsy samples of all those new forms of malware that's out in the world. And once it scans your computer or your server, it's got something to work with. Something to compare it to is what we're saying. Now just general anti-malware, which obviously also includes antivirus, It could be things like anti-spyware. You can see there it's going to protect you against spyware. Trojans, which is not necessarily like a virus. You would remember in our earlier modules we discussed exactly what a Trojan is and why it's called a Trojan and what it's based on and what it does. It checks and scans for things like rootkits and also potentially ransomware. That one is especially important. I think that's probably the most dangerous kind you can get these days is ransomware. All of them are dangerous, don't get me wrong, but ransomware, in my honest opinion, is probably the most dangerous one and the one you want to be on the lookout for the most. Alright, so I think that's enough about execution control. Let's move on to MDM. That stands for Mobile Device Management. Now there's actually many tools that falls into that category of mobile device management. My personal favorite and the one I use most often is something called Intune. It's a Microsoft tool, it's a cloud tool, but it's most certainly not the only tool that does this. So I'm going to use Intune as an example because that's most likely what you guys are going to be using most often realistically in real life. So what does Intune actually do? We know it's a cloud tool. It allows you to manage all your devices regardless of where they are, regardless of what they are, and yeah, it doesn't even matter what operating system they've got on them. How cool is that? So originally it was designed for phones and tablets, but it doesn't just manage phones and tablets. I can manage phones and tablets, obviously, like I just said, laptops and desktops as well. These devices could be Windows, obviously, or Apple, or Android, or even Linux or Linux, as some of you guys might know, just to name a few. I'm not 100% sure yet at this point in time if it supports Huawei's new operating system. Obviously, a while back, Huawei had to go and develop their own new operating system because of the United States of America enforcing a ban on Huawei. So Huawei is a Chinese company, and the United States enforced a ban on Huawei from using Google services, which is an American thing. And Google services includes Android. Android is Google's operating system. And as you guys would know, most Huawei phones, if we're talking about phones and tablets, that is, they use the Android operating system. The newer versions, like the P40 and going forward, do not use Android. They have their own little operating system that Huawei released. Now, I'm not 100% sure yet at this time if Intune supports that new operating system. It's a wonderful operating system. I really love it. If it does not support that, let's assume it does not at this time. I can probably assure you that it's probably going to be supported very soon in the foreseeable future. It just goes without saying. So now we know it supports all devices and all platforms. It doesn't matter what you have. It doesn't matter what you have, and it doesn't matter what your specs is. It can be a fast device, a slow device. It doesn't matter where you are. You can be in a different country. You can be in a different city. As long as you've got a device with a screen and an internet connection, you can go and be managed. The catch is these devices generally need to be enrolled into Intune for them to be managed. If I say I can go and manage any device anywhere, anytime, regardless of anything, that kind of sounds like hacking, doesn't it? So there needs to be some form of control here, and one of those forms of control is these devices that I'm going to be managing needs to be enrolled into my Intune environment. So if I'm going to manage your tablet, your phone, or your laptop even, you need to enroll that device into my Intune environment. Basically, it gives me permission to manage that device. But once I've got permission, the sky is the limit. There's very little that I cannot do on that device of yours. I can see what operating system you've got installed. Okay, well, I can see what device it is. Is it a phone or a tablet or a laptop? Let's say it's a laptop. I can see what operating system you've got on there. Is it Windows or if it's something else? If it's Windows, I can see what build it is. I can see what version it is. Is it enterprise or professional? I can see what CPU you've got, hard drive you've got, how much RAM you've got. I can see what programs you've got installed, what updates, what drivers. Never mind seeing, I can do. I can install things for you, drivers, updates, programs. I can remove things for you. I can even go and remote wipe your device. So in case you've lost it or if you left the company but we feel you've got sensitive information on that device, we can remove it for you. So be careful of these things. So that's a little bit about MDM. I might have gone too far of it. You also get something called BYOD. Definitely something you can expect to in the exam. They might not directly ask you about it, but you definitely need to know the abbreviation of what it means. So it stands for bring your own device. So in most cases, when you work for a company, that company will provide you with the hardware you need. They will give you a laptop if you need one for work. They will give you a tablet or a phone if you need it for work. That's what happens most of the time. Not always. So in some cases, you might, as an extra, go buy yourself an extra device with your own money, which you just happen to be using for the purposes of work. Then there obviously are those exceptions where some companies would expect of you to go and buy your own device to use for the purposes of work. And when you have your own device for the purpose of work, that is called BYOD, bring your own device. Now, obviously, since it's your property, yes, you're going to be using it for work, but you can also go and do personal stuff on it, like watching movies, playing games, because, well, it's your device, isn't it not? If it was the company device, it would be frowned upon. They probably would not allow it. If they catch you, they probably would be moaning about it or complaining about it. But if it's your property, well, what you do with it is your business in your own free time. Okay, so I think that pretty much explains what BYOD is. Moving on to our next topic, which is VPN. So this is an abbreviation. It stands for Virtual Private Network. It's a form of remote connectivity, and it's a secure form of remote connectivity. Originally, this was designed so that people that want to work, for example, from home, so they can connect to the office via a secure channel. So on average, if you're going to be working from home, you might not necessarily have access to your servers and stuff that's at the office. And if you are going to be connecting to the office, it probably would be unsecure, which means someone could see that traffic. They can use something like a packet sniffer, like Wireshark, unsecure. They can hijack your session. There's a lot of things they could potentially go and do. If you're going to go use VPN, you're still going to go and remote connect to the office via some sort of public infrastructure, obviously the internet in that case, except now that connection is encrypted. There's four kinds of encryption you get. So at your house or wherever you're sitting, this could be in a coffee shop, it's in clear text, which means it's visible to you or the human, something you can understand as a human. And as soon as you go out onto the internet, it gets encrypted with one of four kinds of encryption. And once it gets to its destination, it's unencrypted. Now, when you go and VPN to a destination, let's say it's your office, it's as if you're digitally teleporting yourself to the office. Anything you could see and could do while you were in the office, you can do now. So if you could access physical service when you're at the office, you can do that now when you VPN. If you could see your colleagues on the network, digitally speaking when you're with the network, you can do that now. So there's pros and cons to this. Anything you could do, you can do now, but anything you could not do also applies now. So any policies or permissions they have in an environment will automatically be forced down upon you. It's as if you're there after all. So if there's something that blocks you from, for example, going to YouTube or Facebook or just doing whatever in that company environment, as soon as you VPN to that office from your house or the coffee shop, all of that's automatically going to apply to you until you go and disconnect. So if there's a server you need to go and access at the office, as soon as you VPN, you should be able to access it. If you need to be able to access your colleagues over the network, as if you're at the office, as soon as you VPN, you should be able to go and do that. That is what's VPN. It uses a concept called tunneling. That's not a CompTIA concept. I don't know who came up with that. But generally, it'll show you a little picture of your computer going through a little poofy cloud to the destination. That little poofy cloud in the picture represents the internet as we know it. So the poofy cloud is the internet. And when you go through that little poofy cloud, which is the internet, you can imagine yourself being in a little pipe or a little tunnel. It's not really a little pipe or a little tunnel, but you can imagine yourself being in a pipe or a little tunnel. Anyone or anything that's on the internet now, and remember there's about 7 or 8 billion people in the world right now, every person's got about 2 devices. So there's about 16 billion devices that's going to try and hack you or try and hijack you while you're in that session. So you can imagine yourself being in an isolated little pipe or tube when you're on the internet, and anyone or everything cannot penetrate that. And if they can, they're not going to see anything worth value. It's just going to be random symbols that's basically useless to them. There's nothing they can do with it. So that's more or less what a VPN connection. Okay, let's take a look at the next topic, vulnerabilities, threats, and risks. So what exactly is a vulnerability? Any weakness that could be triggered accidentally or exploited intentionally to cause a security breach. It's some sort of weakness that you have physically in your company or maybe at your house. It could be some sort of weakness that you have digitally at your company or at your house. This could be a weakness that's maybe in your firewall. Maybe you've got ports that's exposed, that's open, that's not supposed to be. Maybe you've got services running in the background that's not supposed to be. Maybe you've got, holes in your fence physically at your premises. Maybe your electric fence is off. Maybe your security cameras are not working. All of these could be seen as a vulnerability. It doesn't mean something's going to happen, but what it does mean is someone that's aware of this or someone that could see this could very well go and take advantage of that. So as long as that issue is there and as long as someone doesn't, address the issue, it's going to be of concern. Then we have what we call a threat, any potential violation of security policies or procedures. So that's an idea of what it is. It's not exactly what it is. There's actually a lot of things that can be a threat. So anything that could be a violation of your policy. So someone goes and gives themselves more privilege, or if someone goes and uses the wrong account. Let's say someone uses an admin account that's got way too much privilege. You would remember we talked about least privilege is what you should go and use. So if you or someone goes and uses an admin account that's got way too much privilege, that is seen as a threat. It's a violation of your company's security policies, because if you get that account compromised, or if that user gets that account compromised, now what? So that account can do a lot of damage then. And if you used a limited admin account or some sort of account that's got some sort of limit, the damage would have been a lot less, if not maybe none for that matter. Then we have a threat agent, a person or event that triggers a vulnerability accidentally or exploits it intentionally. And lastly, risk, the likelihood or the actual chance of this happening. So depending on what this is, the chances could maybe be very little. Maybe it's like 1 in 10. Maybe it's like 5% chance this could actually happen. Still a risk at the end of the day. Or maybe the likelihood is extremely likely. So depending on what it is, if it's an account, if it's a physical item, what kind of account it is, what kind of physical item this is, the likelihood could either be very high or very low. And if it's obviously very high, that means you or someone needs to go and address this issue as quickly as possible. The lower the risk, well, the more time you obviously have on your hands. Alright, so and speaking of security, one of the things you need to be concerned of, and this is always going to be something, especially in today's day and age, is social engineering. We're not talking about social media platforms, we're talking about social engineering. So this is when you or someone, one way or another, tricks someone else into giving them information. That's, for the lack of a better description, that is pretty much what it comes down to. So what is pretty popular is if someone sends you or your users an email, that's pretty popular. They'll send you an email and this will probably look like it's coming from a legitimate source in most cases. They'll probably spoof someone's email, more on that in a moment. So they'll send you an email, looks like it comes from a legitimate source. They might pretend to be your bank or your client or your user's bank. They might be pretending to be some, well-known establishment. They'll mail you or your users and ask for something important. Maybe they'll try and trick you or your users into giving them information. Pretend to be your friend, pretend to be that organization, and they'll tell you, okay, we need to confirm your banking details. Please provide us with your bank account number, your PIN, things like that. And anyone that's not generally in IT would very easily go and give up those informations. And as you guys probably know by now, you should never give someone your bank account information. I mean, the bank would never ask you for your PIN because they obviously would notice. The only time they would ask you for this is if you go to the ATM or something like that. Other than that, they would never ask you for this. Another form of social engineering, which is pretty popular, is phone calls. And this is actually becoming a big deal because it doesn't matter who you are. You could even be in IT, and never mind being in IT, you can be an expert in IT, and these phone calls would still catch you. So nowadays, what I've seen a lot of companies would go and do is they would call you, pretend to be a legitimate company, and ask if they're talking to the right person. So they'll mention you by name or by last name, and they're going to go and ask you, are we speaking to this individual? And you usually say something along the lines of yes, or I confirm it is me indeed that's speaking on the phone. And once they confirm it is you, they're going to still ask you for additional information, generally in the form of an ID or a social security number, passport number, all kinds of personal details. And this is quite often legit. Now, what scammers will go and do is they take advantage of this. They will also call you. Generally, it's also from a weird number. Normally, these establishments call you from weird numbers. And these scammers will also call you from a weird number, asking you for the exact same information. And now, whether you're an IT or not, there's no way for you to know whether this is legit or not, because generally the real establishment would ask you for the exact same information. I've seen this happen a lot with banks. Banks would normally call you from a weird number, asking if they're speaking to the right person. They would mention you by name or last name, probably both. And they would ask you a bunch of security questions just to confirm that it really is you indeed. And now the scammers call you pretending to be your bank, also from a weird number, and ask you for the exact same information. Using that information they get from you, they can do all kinds of social engineering attacks. They can go and do identity fraud. You will find unauthorized deductions from your bank accounts, and you're going to wonder to yourself afterwards, how the heck did these people manage this? And the reason they manage this, or the way they manage this, is because of the information you've given them. So let's imagine for a moment the bank does call you, and let's imagine for a moment that they're offering you some sort of service that you might actually find interesting. Normally, we're not interested, but if it sounds like something you're interested in, what I would suggest, and this is only a suggestion, is this is not part of the course per se, is ask the person who they are, ask them if they're trying to sell you something, and if so, what are they trying to sell you? And if it sounds like something you're interested in, which is very unlikely that you're going to be interested in it, tell them, okay, great, I've got your name. What department are you in? And if they tell you what department they're in, tell them you'll call them back. So if it's the bank, you can go to the bank's official website, call the official numbers, ask to be placed to that department or placed through to that department to that individual. And if you can get a hold of that individual at that bank in that department, then you know it was legit. If you cannot get a hold of that person, they tell you we don't know what you're talking about, then you know it was a scam. Now, generally, if you call the banks or places like the banks, it's generally a toll-free number, so you don't have to be concerned about phone call costs involved. And even if you are paying for that call, you can ask that person to call you back. I can pretty much assure you that they will definitely call you back, because most people they call generally hang up on them or are not interested in these products. So if you even remotely sound like you're interested in this product, they will most certainly call you back in a matter of a minute or less, because you're a hot lead, is what they call it. So these are forms of social engineering. It's obviously not just limited to that. I mean, other kinds would probably be social media. I can add you on something like Facebook or wherever, pretend to be your friend, and I can ask all kinds of personal questions over the course of a few months or a few weeks. And if I do it over a long period of time, you're not going to notice it. And gradually, slowly but surely, I'm going to gain all kinds of inside info about you, which I can use against you. I can use this information to maybe go and reset your security questions. I can, go and answer your security questions, and now I can go and reset your password to a certain platform, perhaps. So be careful when people ask you weird questions online, is what I'm saying. All right, so once again, regarding social engineering, here is a few common social engineering exploits, not limited to this. Impersonation is one, so where I'm pretending to be someone or something I'm not. I'm pretending to be your bank. I'm pretending to be your friend. Phishing is something that's quite common as well, and it's spelled like that on purpose. So I'm not fishing for fish, I'm fishing for information. So I'll send you an email fishing for your banking information, perhaps. I'll call you, fishing for your personal details, perhaps. These are examples of phishing. I'll maybe add you on Facebook and I'll pretend to be your friend for a few weeks, fishing for personal information. Spoofing, which I briefly mentioned earlier, is pretending to also be from a destination or something that I'm not. So I can spoof an IP address, spoof a MAC address, or spoof an email address. Email address spoofing is probably one of the most popular ones. So what you can go and do is, you get lots of free websites online that actually does this, and you don't even need to have any IT knowledge to be able to use those websites. That's how scary easy this actually is. And that's a big concern for companies. I can go to one of these websites, just as an example, and it's going to ask me from what destination do you want to pretend to be from, and I can go and type in a well-known organization or establishment's email. This could be the bank, and then I go and type in the destination destination's email address, and when I send you that mail, it's going to look like it's coming from a legit source, even though it's not. And I can go and choose what the body looks like and everything, completely free of charge. And there's no way for you to know whether this is real or not, unless you've got some very advanced, sophisticated software running in the background that scans the IP address and all of that for this email, where it's coming from. There's no way for you as a human to know whether this is legit or not. Even if you are an IT expert, there's no way for you as a human to know whether this is legit or not. So it is absolutely crucial for especially medium to large size organizations to have some form of software in the background that scans emails for spoofing attacks. So if and when you receive an email that looks legit, not just does it look legit, it's going to go and check where is it actually coming from, IP address wise. Dumpster diving, what the heck is that? So when I say dumpster, I've got this visualization in my head of someone jumping into a dumpster. And I suppose in a manner of speaking, it could technically be that. So it basically just comes down to someone going through your trash in the hopes of finding something sensitive in nature. So it could just be a small little bin, underneath your desk, where you maybe have a bunch of papers that you've thrown away or that you've shredded. And they're going to go through that and look for something that's of value, something sensitive in nature. They could actually be going through your actual trash outside, your trash bags, your trash cans, whatever you have in your environment. And once again, in the hopes to finding something sensitive. Maybe it's a bank pin, a bank account number, maybe it's a copy, a photocopy of your ID, perhaps your driver's license, anything that they can go and use, obviously. Shoulder surfing kind of explains itself. So that is when someone stands near you, generally behind you or at an angle behind you, close enough to be able to see over your shoulder, like the name suggests, so they can see something important. This could be maybe while you're working on your computer or something. And when you type in a password, they could potentially see your hands or your fingers when you're pressing the keys, which means they could potentially see the password. Another popular form of shoulder surfing would probably be an ATM, where people will go withdraw money. So someone would stand behind you in an angle and they will try and see what you're typing in when you try and type in your PIN. So that is also pretty dangerous, which is why you'll find a lot of these ATMs these days, doesn't matter where you are and what bank you're with, they normally have some sort of protective screening, which means unless you're standing directly in front of this ATM and you're looking at it at the right angle, you're not going to be able to see anything on the screen. It's going to be a blank screen. But it does not stop them from looking at your fingers where you're pressing on the keyboard. So be careful whenever you go to ATM. Check if someone is near you and if they're looking at what you're pressing. So always, kind of cover up the keypads, what we're saying. Tailgating, the last one here, is where you follow someone in somewhere without authorizing or authenticating yourself. This could be maybe at a door, perhaps, maybe at a company. You are pretending to work at that company. Maybe it's a very large company of hundreds or even thousands of people. And as someone opens a door, maybe with an access card of some kind, you basically just tell them, hey, can you please hold that door for me? Maybe you'll even pretend to have your hands full. So you'll on purposely carry something, making it look like your hands are full. And as someone's about to close the door, you just tell them, please hold the door for me. And they hold the door open for you, and you effectively get in without authenticating. That is a form of tailgating. Another form of tailgating could potentially be when you're driving in behind someone behind a gate. So if someone's driving in, into an office park, a home, a complex of some kind, and as they go through the security gates, you drive close enough behind them to be able to get in without having to authenticate, at the gates of some way. It's also a form of tailgating. So these are social engineering, but the social engineering one for tailgating is more when you basically trick people into letting you into places, like telling them to hold the door for you because your hands are supposedly full. Meanwhile, your hands were on purposely full so that it doesn't look suspicious. So since we're talking so much about social engineering and exploits, let's look a bit at mitigations to social engineering attacks. In other words, what can we possibly go and do to try and avoid this from happening to us or our clients or our users? Now, one of the main things you can go and do is training. Not necessarily for yourselves. I mean, you guys probably know a lot of this stuff already. Maybe you learned something, maybe you did not. But the main important thing here is to train your users and your clients. At the end of the day, you can have the best security that money can buy. You can have the latest of the latest, the best of the best. But if you don't educate or train your employees, your clients, or your end users, none of that security is going to help you. Your weakest link is usually the end user. So you need to go and tell these users, do not open an email if you were not expecting one. Do not open an attachment if you were not expecting an attachment. If you were not expecting a link, do not click on that link. If someone asks you for personal information, do not release that information unless you followed procedure. That actually applies to you as well. So if someone's asking for some sort of logon details, just as an example, I'm not just going to go and release that. I'm going to follow protocol. There's probably a procedure in place for releasing that data. Maybe they're going to have to log a call, a ticket with management perhaps, and they in turn will pop me a mail, and eventually I'm going to pop management a mail with the credentials and they will give it back to that person. So whatever the procedure is, you're going to have to go and follow that to basically cover your hiney, is what we're saying. Identify phishing style attacks. Yeah, that is good for you, not necessarily for the end user. That's good for you to go and learn, because you get many kinds. But at the end of the day, realistically, it's impossible for you to know them all. All you can go and do is just try your best to go and learn as many of these styles as possible. For example, I've told you guys that people would potentially try and call you, pretending to be your friend, pretending to be your bank. They could potentially try and mail you. They could potentially try and add you on a platform like Facebook, try and be your friend. These are considered styles of attacks. It's absolutely not the only kind, and it probably would not be the last kind. There's most likely a lot of new ones that's still coming. With us moving into the 21st century, and if there being so much IT out there, there's probably only a matter of time before we see more styles. The last one is not to release work-related information to third-party sites or social networking. Absolutely not, unless you've been explicitly granted permission to do so, or unless you've been explicitly instructed to do so by your company or a manager of some kind. You should absolutely not mention any work-related information on any form of third-party or social networking websites. Whether it's a security concern or not, it's just bad for your company or for your brand. So some companies would actually sue you, or it'll get you into a lot of hot water if you go and mention anything on social media. This could sometimes just be something simple as you wearing a company shirt while you're at an alcoholic party. It's seen as bad for the company brand when you wear that brand, but you're also in a photo on Facebook, drinking a beer or some sort of alcoholic beverage. Doesn't look bad. It doesn't look good for the company, is what we're saying. Now, another type of attack we get is network footprinting threats. This is pretty cool and surprisingly actually very easy to go do. Might sound complicated, but it's actually easier than you would think. So, footprinting, information gathering threat in which the attacker attempts to learn about the configuration of the network and security systems through social engineering attacks or software-based tools. In most cases, through software-based tools, but I suppose it could also be in a matter of social engineering attacks. So you can basically imagine I'm at your company and I'm asking all kinds of people that work there about their network. Do you guys have servers on premises? Kind of just sound like I'm interested. Do you guys have servers on premises, or is your stuff in the cloud? Do you have printers? How do you connect to your network? General stuff like that. Most often, though, it's going to be a matter of me using some sort of software-based tools on my computer. So if I happen to have a laptop, or if I happen to have access to a computer, I could very easily go and put the right software on my laptop or that computer and use that to scan your network, do pings, and scan your network just to check what your IP range is, how many servers you've got, what the server's IP addresses are, how many devices you've got. I can see a lot of things of what we're saying. And if I can see that stuff, I can hack that stuff. I can try and break into them. Now, the second one here is network mapping. Tools used to gather information about the way the network is built and configured and the current status of hosts. Pretty scary. Last one, port scanning. Software that enumerates the status of TCP and UDP ports on a target system. Port scanning can be blocked by some firewalls and intrusion detection systems. That's what the IDS stands for, by the way. So this sounds all very complicated, but in a nutshell, I think I have mentioned port scanning before in this course. You can imagine it as someone walking around your house or your office building looking for an open window or an open door. And if they find an open window to a room, and this room is maybe unoccupied, in other words, not in use, they could very easily take advantage of that room or that window, climb in, take something or change something, digitally speaking, and that's bad. Ports are like windows into your building. So these ports are obviously windows into your computer. It's a means for traffic to get in and out of your computer, your server, or your network. So if a port is not in use, you should probably go and close it. If a window in your building is not in use, you should probably go and close it. Otherwise, someone could take advantage of that window that's open, just like someone could take advantage of a port that's open. So there's many ways you can go, do port scanning. You could just go do it manually, which is going to take a while, but it can be done. Or they can use some form of software that's basically going to check all the well-known ports that would normally be open. Alright, so here's some more threats for you guys. Eavesdropping. So this kind of reminds me of our grandma, if I'm being perfectly honest. My grandma is one of those, very nice, sweet old grandmas that'll give you cookies and milk and sweets and all that kinds of stuff. But she is a bit nosy. If you tell something to my grandma, the whole family would know tomorrow. And eavesdropping reminds me of that, digitally speaking. So, digitally speaking, someone is going to be listening in on your conversation, your digital conversation. So, when I send an email to you, someone is intercepting that email and trying to get a hold of something sensitive. If I am maybe in a voice conversation with you guys, maybe over a VoIP platform like Zoom, Teams, whatever you want to go and use, Skype, then they're listening in on that conversation. So it could be a matter of me browsing on the internet and they're trying to capture that information, those packets, in the hopes of getting something like a username or password, bank account number. So point is they're using something like Wireshark, not necessarily Wireshark, in the hopes of getting something important, something of value, something sensitive that they can go and use. All right, so that's eavesdropping. Now Mac, obviously MAC address flooding, is overloading the switch's MAC cache to prevent genuine devices from connecting. Not something I see that often anymore. This is kind of becoming extinct. It's just people are probably preoccupied with other types of attacks these days. And an ARP poisoning is maps IP addresses to your network interface card's MAC address. So that's basically what ARP poisoning is. ARP is when you go into command prompt, you type in ARP, and it's going to basically show you which MAC address belongs to which IP address. And that's actually one way out of many ways for you to go and map your network like we spoke of earlier. I used to go and do that at some of my clients. Obviously for legal reasons I would go and do that, because if I need to know what devices are on the network so I can go and troubleshoot them, that's one way I would go and do it if I don't have any tools to my disposal, is to go and do ARP requests. Okay, and then moving on to something called spoofing and MITM, which stands for man in the middle. So spoofing and man in the middle threats. We did briefly mention spoofing earlier already to you guys, so that's pretending to be someone or something or from somewhere I'm not. So I can pretend to be someone I'm not by, spoofing their email, spoofing their MAC address, spoofing their IP address, or just plain spoofing their account. I could maybe go make myself a fake Facebook account, a fake YouTube account, or a fake something, pretending to be someone I'm not. And I can trick people into giving information that they would otherwise not have given me unless they thought I was the original person. Now, the second one, there is a replay attack. Generally, this is something someone would go and do if they got a hold of some sort of sensitive information, and it might be time sensitive, that information. So if you, for example, connect to a server or some sort of platform, and I was doing some form of attack in the middle where I was able to get a hold of your username and password, as soon as you disconnect from that platform, let's say it's a server, I would immediately reconnect to that server right after you disconnect, and I'll use that exact same username and that exact same password before it expires or before you change it. That is basically what a replay attack comes down to. So when an attacker gets your credentials, they're going to go and try and use it as quickly as possible to re-establish that connection before you end up changing it or before it expires. Some credentials sometimes expires, which is also why they sometimes are in such a big rush. Man in the middle, it kind of explains itself. So that's what the MITM is once again. So it's when someone in the middle intercepts your communication. It's very much the same as eavesdropping, like we spoke of earlier. And this man in the middle is also generally used or done via Wireshark. So when you connect to someone via email, you send them an email, you connect to them, you go to a website, you connect to a server, you connect to the cloud. I'm going to be in the middle and I'm going to try and get a hold of that information of yours, your packets of data, so to speak, in once again the hope of getting something sensitive. This is one of the reasons, not the only reason, but it's one of the reasons why you should go use something like a VPN connection. So when you go to public websites online, this could be a torrent website, this could be any kind of website, someone could very well be doing what we call a man in the middle attack on you, and they can see what you're doing, what kind of information you're transferring, all kinds of stuff. So when you do a VPN connection to that website, I would recommend you do a legit VPN connection. There's lots of free ones online, there's lots of ones you can go and buy. Preferably go and buy one, they're not going to cost you an arm and a leg, and at least it's secure. So when you go and do a VPN connection, it's an encrypted connection, like we said earlier. So they cannot trace you, they cannot see your information. There's a lot of things they cannot go and do. So I highly encourage you guys to go and use a VPN, preferably one that you buy. They really are not that expensive. Another well-known one would probably be NordVPN. So I would say go to a search engine of your choice, something like Google, run a search for VPNs, and whatever pops up, those first few suggestions is probably going to be the best one. I think NordVPN is one of them. It's not the only one. I mean, there's lots of other well-known ones as well. You'll probably see a few ads and YouTube videos as well for that. And then the last one here is mutual authentication. A client authenticates to the server and the server authenticates to the client. So it's not one-way authentication. Normally, when you log on to something, a server, a website, or whatever, it's only the client that authenticates to some form of server. It could be that same server, it could be a different server. Now, mutual authentication is when that same server needs to actually authenticate back to you as well. It's like double security. It's not going to stop perpetrators, but it's just going to make it so much harder for them at the end of the day. Now, another type of attack you get is also password attacks. Definitely something you guys need to be aware of because you guys are going to have to go and fight this. I suppose this will probably be a form of hacking in a matter of speaking. So your job is to stop these black hat hackers, is what we call them, by being a white hat hacker. So you basically need to be a criminal to catch a criminal is what they're saying. So if you understand what these things are and how they work, you would be able to go and mitigate them, stop other people from doing them. So with regards to password attacks, you get many kinds. These are some of the main kinds. The first one there is a rainbow table. What is a rainbow table? That's basically when I've got a pretty decent sized list of possible passwords, and these are well-known passwords or popular passwords that I know that people like using. Most cases it's going to be actual words. It's probably birthdays, actual words, names, things like that. Any password that I know is a very popular password, I'll go and add them to that list. You can imagine it as being a giant notepad file, a giant notepad list, a text document with all of these possible passwords, which are dates, names, words, and stuff. And when I go to any place that I want to break into, it could be a device, could be a website, a platform of some kind. I'm going to use that rainbow table. It's normally a program is going to try all of those possible passwords on your behalf. It does it automatically for you because it can just do it so much quicker for you. You could probably go and do it manually as well. That's also technically a rainbow table. It's just going to be a lot slower. So rainbow tables not that effective anymore because most computer server environments, cloud environments, and all platforms these days force you to have at least an 8-character password. First of all, they force you to have uppercase, lowercase, numbers, and symbols in your password. This is to help mitigate password attacks. Still not going to stop them completely, but it's definitely going to go and mitigate them. For example, rainbow tables don't really work against those passwords. So for the most part, you can say rainbow tables are kind of extinct. The only time a rainbow table might still work is if it's a normal desktop PC password that's not on a domain. But then you don't even need to use a rainbow table because there's actually other ways to get around that. Now a dictionary attack is an attack that's going to go, and it's very much the same as a rainbow table. It's still actual words, but it's actually going to just go and take actual words from the dictionary. It's not that effective because a lot of people don't actually use words from the dictionary. They normally use names. Yeah, I think names are actually way more popular. So dictionary attack, it could be, but the chances are unlikely you're going to get a hit on that. Brute force is probably the most popular one. That means you're just guessing the person's password, trying all possible combinations. So you could go do this manually by just going to someone's account on whatever platform this might be, trying a whole bunch of different combinations, 10, 20, 50, or 100, until you basically get in. That could be a brute force attack. Or you get computer programs that will basically go and try any possible password combination you can imagine. Now, the longer the password is, the longer it's going to take that computer or that server to crack that password, which is why it is so important to have at least an 8-character password. The longer your password, the more characters you have, the more variety of characters you have, the longer and the longer and the longer it's going to take that password program to crack that password. By the time it cracks the password would have expired, which is also why it's so important for you to have password expired. It's not just because someone could have possibly have told a friend about that password, could have possibly have written down the password, or someone could have possibly have seen the password. I mean, it's obviously going to go and help with those things as well, but it's also to go and mitigate possible brute force attacks that's happening in the background. So for all we know, someone is actively trying to crack your password or one of your end users' passwords in the background, but it's not working because every time, by the time they would have cracked it, their password probably would have changed it already 2 times or 3 times. Alright, and then another type of attack we get is DOS, denial of service attacks. Now you get this in many shapes and sizes, like most of the other attacks we've mentioned. It could first of all be an actual service on your computer that's being denied, kind of like one of those services I showed you guys in one of the earlier modules. So when you go to your computer and you go to actual services on your computer, it could be an actual service that's being denied, like the print spooler. So if I deny you the print spooler by just turning it off, that's a denial of service attack. So whenever you or one of the users tries to print, just nothing's going to happen. That's a form of a denial of service attack. It could also be a matter of me blocking you from accessing a server of some kind. It could be a public server, could be an internal server. I could block you from accessing a website, either internal or public. Either way, these are all examples of denying you access to some form of service. Now, the way I could go and block that website could be in many ways as well. I could just go and physically hack the server and turn it off. That's very unlikely though, because the security is normally too tight. Or I could go and overload that server or that service, which is the most popular one. So if this is a website, a public website that can theoretically handle 10,000 people at a given time, you can go and, let's say, hit that website of 20,000 people. It's probably going to be 20,000 fake people, but the server will not be able to cope with that load because it was designed to handle 10,000 people, and normally it idles on about 5,000. So the extra 5,000 is just a buffer. But if you're going to go and have 20,000 people, fake people, hit that website at the same time, it's going to overload that website because the server is not meant to handle that kind of load. And now whenever someone, a real someone, tries to go to that website, just nothing's going to happen. It's just going to hang and hang and hang, give you an error, or just, well, just say not responding. So that's not something you want to experience. Okay, everybody, that is pretty much it for module 12. This has been very security related, this module. And the next few modules are also going to either directly or indirectly be security related, at least the next 2 modules. So I can't remember exactly which module is what, but as soon as I start giving those modules, we'll see what is actually in those modules. So if you are still with me at this point in time, remember to go and drop a comment down below. As I've said earlier, it does help boost this video. And the more we can boost this video, the more people we can help, and the more it helps my video, the more it helps my channel, blah, 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 blah. You know the drill by now. Alright, and also remember to give that like. It also helps boost my channel. And if you are new to the channel and you would just like to know when I go and upload all my nonsense, feel free to subscribe, preferably with the notification bell. And like usual, guys, I will see you on the next module, being module 13.
If you love me, let me know. If you don't, then let me